I'm Susan Rushton. Welcome to Olio. And before I go any further, I need to explain what Olio means. Olio is short for olla podrida, which is Spanish for rotten bowl, which I just get such a kick out of. It's a Spanish-Portuguese dish with essentially everything in the world in it. Pork in all its iterations, bacon, sausage, pig's ears, as well as chicken, chickpeas, cabbage, carrots, beans, and of course onions and garlic. That's, as I said, everything in the world except carrots and frosted flakes. That's one definition. Another definition is that olio is what comes in between things that have been going on in a melodrama. You might have a song, somebody juggling, somebody telling jokes, and it has nothing to do with anything else, and certainly nothing to do with the melodrama. So in other words, it's apples, oranges, and a monkey wrench. So welcome to my monkey wrench. So today my guest is Dan Araujo. Thank you, Dan.
No.
It's a pleasure to meet you, to see you.
Likewise.
And we've met several times before. Mm-hmm. Dan is involved in the Auburn Art Commission, and if you are interested in the Auburn Art Commission, take a look at auburnartsca@gmail.com. That's if you want to email them, or go on to auburnca.art and you'll find out more information. And ordinarily, this might be better for my arts show, but this is more than an arts. This one is more than art. And Dan is deeply involved with something called wind phone. And so, Dan, what is wind phone?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to do this.
Sure.
And to discuss the project. It was called Conversations with the Wind is the official title of it. Wind phone, grief phone are different ways of saying it, like, shortening it. But overall, the concept is a phone that is connected to nothing.
A phone connected to nothing.
A phone connected to nothing.
So, and where would this be?
We are looking at Bicentennial Park. It's the little park in Old Town area, and we have a couple of sites that we're thinking of putting it over there. Putting where to put it over there. So
why?
Why Bicentennial Park?
No. Why a phone that isn't connected to anything?
I would say that the short answer to that is that it creates dialogue about mental health. And that is something that has been close to my heart for a very, very long time.
Okay.
The other thing it does is it creates an avenue, if you will, for people who are suffering or going through grief. And it gives them a place to express that, to let it out, so to speak. And it also can give a sense of closure as well to these people that are going through that.
Even though they're talking, but nobody else is on the other end.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically.
Nobody else is on the other end, that's correct.
You can put I'm remembering when my mother was dying, and I was at the library, moving into the library. I was crunched like this, and I moved into the library, and then I turned around and saw all these. It was sun. The sun was out, and it was March, April, May, and things were joyous, and if I could have had a phone, I would have phoned her. I would have talked to her and tell her, I will miss you, but things are getting there. Things are changing. Things are being better. Things are new. You may be gone, but I will see other things. And that sounds sort of terrible, but it's hard. It's hard when somebody is dying.
It is.
But there's nothing you can do about it, but except to help yourself.
Exactly, and I feel like what moved me the most about this concept was getting to do that, to have that. I went through a time in my life close to a decade ago where I lost my grandmother, Anna, who was very dear to me, and it was a huge loss. And it was a situation where she was not declining for a long time. What happened to her, she passed away from stomach cancer, and we didn't know about it until very soon after, very quickly. It all just kind of snowballed. And from the time we found out what it was to the time she passed was a very short period of time. And how do you don't call to mind the things that you want to say to a person while they're going through such a thing.
It's too soon, too quick.
Exactly, but you're processing it all the same. I mean, I can remember sitting in her hospital bed with her, watching her just, being going through this, and there's so much going on internally that you just don't know what to say to, and sometimes you don't get the chance to say the things that you want to say. I mean, I don't mean, expressions of love or being there, being devoted. It's just sometimes it just doesn't hit your mind when you want it to, until after they're gone, and then you're left with the void that they've left.
She's not there.
Yeah, and you start to see and then it's funny. Our brains, throughout our grief, start to recall like these little things. And one of my favorite sayings actually is that the little things are the big things. It's the little things about a person that you remember the most, not the big things that they've done or the grand gestures they've made. It's the little stuff, and that's the stuff that would come back to my mind.
Maybe her eyebrow goes up, or
how she used to say the word Dupree a certain way. Now she's from she's East Coast Italian, and so she had, when she moved over here from Rhode Island, she had her accent. And they moved over here in the 70s, so I kicked around in the 80s, and then so there had been decades that had passed with her living in California.
Remembered her Italian accent.
Yes, and I would remember certain words that she would say with it still, because she couldn't say it without it.
Yeah.
And one of those was that word, and it would just come into my brain after she had passed, and it would just be, Another thing was how she did crossword puzzles. She loved doing crossword puzzles, and I, for years, hadn't even picked up a newspaper, and then one day I just decided to pick up a newspaper because I hadn't read one in a while, and I started doing the crossword. And as I'm doing the crossword puzzle,
I remember my grandmother.
One of the answers was Anna.
Oh, really?
Her name. And so I remember at that moment getting this like warm sense inside and kind of looking up and going, "Hi, Grandma," But so having that outlet to channel the feelings that you have with that loss was something that I didn't really have when I was grieving her after she passed. And it was a long time, a long process, years for me to really understand all the ways that her death has been, was hitting me.
Yeah.
And so having a way, one of the things that I had been told to do was to journal, and I had already been an avid journalist, like I've kept a journal. She had actually bought me a journal months before she passed, so that was very close to me, and that was instilled in me. But having that way of having that last conversation, and doing it in a way that still felt like we were really talking to one another, was what made me think that conversation, what attracted me to Conversations on the Wind, and the idea of it, that idea of I can make a phone call to her. Why not? Yeah, I already felt like there were moments where there were time where I felt like I wanted to call her.
Sure.
So here I am doing that, and I've talked to other people who have gone through loss, and they felt the same way.
It feels good. It feels. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And there's a tangibility aspect to it as well, where you're actually, to pick up a phone, you can dial their number, and you know what you're doing. You have that realistic sense still, but you still just
they're dead. They're not really going to hear, but it feels as if they do.
Yeah, you're going through that process of feeling like you are contacting them, and I feel like that is what creates that well of, I'm stepping out of reality and going deeper within myself.
I like that. Yes. Yeah.
And that's important.
And that's helpful.
It's very helpful. Yes. It helps you bring up the emotions and sift through them and work on them and not, I don't mean work on them in a sense that you're going to eradicate or completely get rid of them, but you acknowledge them. And when you acknowledge your grieving, it's helpful for making it, for bringing it down a little bit.
Sure.
I feel like for making it less intense.
Yeah.
Because now it's not screaming at you to look at it. It's saying, oh, you're seeing me, you're giving me energy. Like, good, now we can work we can work together here, so to speak,
Yeah.
So, I going through grief, there's so many different aspects of it, and it touches so many different lives in so many different ways.
Yes.
And I feel like what the Conversation with the Wind does is it broadens, it has such a broad appeal. And it can speak to so many different walks of life. It originated in Japan.
Yeah.
And it's been a concept that has been since adopted through various countries and even in various states in the United States ever since its inception.
How did you learn about it?
A news article actually in the Sacramento Bee was talking about a man who had done one in, I want to say it was Washington.
Okay.
Yeah. And he had heard about it at some point somewhere and went to Goodwill, bought a telephone, and nailed it to a post in a local park. And there was a sign that explained what it was there for. And there was such a huge response to it.
Really?
That the park came back to him and said, well, we want you to actually make this permanent. So
good.
Build a booth and like set the whole thing up. And so it really took off. But in that same article I read about a woman who had she lived on I'm not sure if this was in the same place, but it was a woman who had a house on a certain number of acres. I want to say 2 or something like that. And she had gone through loss herself. She had read about she had read about the idea of the wind phone, and she decided to put one on her property. And it was to help, I want to say it was to help her, if I'm remembering it
sure,
with what she was going through. And she ended up doing it, and then people started gravitating towards it. And local people would see it, read what it was there for, and they would use it. And it became this beautiful, special thing that she felt like she was offering to people. And one of the things that really sold it for me, I want to say, and I don't mean,
Well, no, I know what you mean.
You know
I know
what I mean?
what you- absolutely.
Something that just hit me straight into the heart, right?
Yes.
Was she started noticing that when people would walk away from the booth, they were crying, and she would offer hugs. And she would give people hugs, and not a word would be spoken between them, and then they would walk away. And it was such an amazing, it was amazing to see that you could touch so many different lives so closely. And just, I don't know, like that's
helpful.
Yeah, and it's connection
Yes.
as well. It erased the wall that is sometimes predominantly between, most people in society. It broke down the barrier because, and I'm no better. When you see someone going through something, the impulse sometimes is to run away from it, is to not want to deal with it, or not want to be involved with it.
Or you have no idea what to say.
Or and that's what it comes down to, I feel like. And this created a way of pushing through that, allowing people to talk, allowing people to be okay with saying what's going on with them, and to feel what's going on with them. And that's something that, again, is appealing to me, because when I was going through my own grieving, it was something that was the hardest thing to do, was to open up, but you wanted to at the same time. It was such a weird sensation.
You're supposed to be dealing with this.
Right.
You're supposed to be a grown-up. You're not 7. You're 41. You're
Right.
31. I'm a grown-up.
Yeah.
People die.
Yeah. It's an acceptance of it, or you got to remain stoic or whatnot, or that's just the way life is. And it's like, that's...
Yes, but
yeah, it's like there's still so much more to it. I mean, there's just, it's complicated, it's nuanced, it's not something that's just black and white.
Right.
And I feel like one of the ways that you go through this is by talking through it. I am involved with a group. It's the AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and one of the aspects of that is, creating dialogue and creating awareness about suicide prevention, and reaching out to people who are
considering.
Well, all different types. The people who have that lived experience, the people who are coping with their loss because of it, giving them space to say what they're going through, to feel what they're going through, and to not feel as though it is a burden, or that it is something that you just need to get over.
Yeah.
That was something that hit me the hardest when I was going through my own grief stage. Was there was no time limit on this. There couldn't be one.
Right.
And I felt like the world sometimes wanted to impose that there should be one. You got to get over it, You
Come on, she's gone.
Yeah.
But my mother's gone, my father's gone, and I think about them every day. My mother would laugh, and I remember her laughing, and I can't not think about that. And there are some flowers called lobelia. She didn't call them lobelia. She called them lobelia. She loved them, and then whenever I see it, it's lobelia, and it's as if I'm on the phone talking to her. Yes, because I remember you, Mother.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And she's still, and people who who's, yeah, you're right. You're people who haven't had death. You were younger. You expected to be separated, and that was it. But it isn't.
No.
She was there, in your heart, in your head, in your mind. You remember her now, and is that wrong? Of course not. She was a lovely woman. She was a wonderful, helpful, delightful person, and you want to remember her. Do you talk to her much, or talk to someone, or this, that?
Well, I mean, I do. There's a saying I heard. I think it was from a movie somewhere that said, "The dead don't die; they look on and help." And it's something that I definitely feel.
Okay.
I'm born and raised in the Bay Area. I grew up there. I moved up here about almost 9 years ago now, and that was a big step for me because I did it all by myself. I have family in Roseville, but we weren't necessarily close, and doing that was also leaving where they lived and where they are. Both her and my grandfather, who I was also very close with, and lost him a few years before. So that was a big step for me, and it was good in the sense because it didn't feel like I was leaving them.
Okay.
So seeing them now, and what I was leaving actually was the reminder of everything, of the entire life, which that I lived out there. So it was a lot of like noise that got diminished with me moving away from it. And so I feel like that made me, in a sense, closer and more receptive to their messages when they do speak, or when we speak. I can hear them more, or just like feel their presence a lot more. Yeah. And it was interesting to me because my mother, this was her parents. My mother told me that my grandfather had always wanted to move up in this area. They went to Jackson a lot, and they had always loved the idea of living up here. So it was interesting to me that
I don't blame them.
No, I don't either. It was interesting to me that I ended up ended up out here.
Yeah.
So that in a sense is another way I feel like they talk to me still.
Good.
All of a sudden I decided I wanted to pick up the guitar again and learn the guitar. My grandfather was a jazz guitarist, so that's another way of that connection and maintaining that.
Sure. Okay. Now I have a question. You've been talking about this for a while.
Yes.
You've been working on this, and you've been thinking about it and talking to other people. There are probably some who find it, what's the matter with you? What is your reaction? What do you say to them?
My reaction has been, well, it calls to mind what was fundamentally what drove me to bring it up to the Arts Commission in the first place, was that even if nobody thought the idea of walking into a telephone booth connected to nothing and talking to a long deceased or a deceased loved one, even if that appeals to nobody, at the very least, it makes people go, "What is that there for?" Oh, it's there for that. And it spurs the conversation.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted from the get-go, was something that got people talking about the things we don't want to talk about. This, not only just suicide prevention, mental health awareness, the things that are what society deems to be too complicated to speak on, or just something we don't want to incorporate in our daily lives, in a sense of it's just too much of a problem. or it's too hard of a problem to solve. And it is a hard problem to solve, or one that, if it's one that can be solved anyway.
Yeah.
But I feel like that dialogue is what ultimately soothes us and allows an outlet.
Okay.
And the more it's accepted in the general conversation of our daily lives, the better off we will be because of that.
So it's not just because you have somebody who's dying or who has died.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're talking about your problem to yourself.
In a sense,
Yeah.
yes. You can use it. Yes.
Here's a phone.
Mm-hmm.
It won't. It's not connected to anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can do anything you want to.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Anything.
you can say, "Aren't I wonderful?" or
Mm-hmm.
"I'm in trouble," whichever.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
People talk to themselves all the time.
Hello.
It's a normal. It's more common than I think some people like to realize. That yes.
And the older you get, the more you talk to yourself. Yeah.
But it's an instrument. It's a tool to create dialogue, to create the conversations that are outside of the normal. And I don't want to say normal, but the outside of the more common ones that we
Okay.
have, and to bring about, to implant the ideas in people's minds that, hey, I can listen to this, or I can hear this, or yeah, I feel this way. Maybe somebody else does too. I can reach out to that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's creating a voice for sometimes people that don't have one. Or don't know how to have one. That was another thing that was very interesting about the grief, going through grief, is you start to realize that some people don't have the means to really describe what they're going through. And I mean, you and I are both writers, so
Yes.
words and descriptions,
We are both writers. Yes.
they comes more naturally to us, right? Because it's a trick of our trade, so to speak. But some people don't know how to do that, how to go about doing it, how to even begin formulating their loss.
And the wind phone is a can help us.
It's an icebreaker.
Yeah, an icebreaker. I
Yeah.
like that.
The way I pitched it to the Arts Commission was, I think it's funny because you have this anachronistic looking entity in like a park somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's an old phone booth. We actually have an old school phone booth,
Yeah.
and there's a phone in it. And it's like, what are they doing there? Everybody has cell phones. So it automatically stands out.
Yes.
And it draws your attention to it. Okay, what is this about? Oh, there's a sign there. Oh, it's for talking to deceased loved ones if you're going through grief. Huh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Now you know it's there. Because grief is going to touch everyone's life
Yeah.
at some point, no matter what.
Yeah. And we need to stop here. We need to stop here. And and this is
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
Dan, I really appreciate your talking with me.
Yeah.
And if you want to approach Dan, Dan, DANARAUJO, number one, 1111 at Gmail. DANARAUJO 1111 at Gmail.
If I could just take one more quick minute, I
Okay.
just wanted to express again thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk and to help stoke the conversation about mental health awareness. For those that are interested in maybe getting out and coming to an event, there is a Out of the Darkness walk coming up. It will be Saturday, October the 5th. The registration will be at 9 a.m., but the actual walk itself will start at 10. And it's at Railhead Park. This is for the AFSP, the group I mentioned earlier. It's the Suicide Prevention group that I'm involved in,
Okay.
and this is all a part of what compelled me to just go with the conversations
good.
with the wind.
Okay.
So yeah, and then there was yeah.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been just lovely. And thank you for watching. I'll see you again.